Hey guys, Rick Taylor here with KS USA. Today we're going to talk about how to service your E20i dropper post. Okay, so some of the basic tools that we're going to need to service KS dropper we'll go over here. If there are additional or specific or specialty tools for your particular model that we're going to go over, we'll discuss those in further detail a little bit later on in the video. So you want to start with a good quality biodegradable degreaser. We tend to like the Simple Green cleaners here. You can dilute them down to whatever ratio you want. They wash away easily, and they're not caustic or damaging. So a good degreaser. For lubrication, we recommend either the KS Post Paste, or if you don't have that available, the Slick Oleum is basically the same formula. It's designed specifically for suspension use, more specifically air oil systems, so it's a really good lubrication to use. We don't recommend using automotive grease because they tend to be a higher viscosity and can cause poor performance of your dropper if you use those. A pair of soft jaws so that you can hold the seat post. The one that we have here happens to have a round clamp hole in it, but if you can't find one of these in your local market, you can also do a V-block, which a lot of times you can get those from Amazon or from a local hardware store, a machine shop supply. Those kind of places have them. And essentially you just need something that you're going to be able to clamp and hold the tube. If you don't have access to that, don't panic. You can also use the bicycle frame to hold the post in place while we unthread the collar. We'll go over that in a little more detail later. Utility knife, we generally will use this just to help us remove the guide bushings. So these are handy to have. If you don't have one, you can do it by using your fingernail, but I'd recommend if you can find a utility knife, definitely grab that. A set of Allen wrenches. So you're going to need from a 6 down to a 1.5 millimeter set. So they can either be a T-handle like this, or you can have one of the little pocket folding ones work great too, but just make sure they're good quality so you don't end up rounding or stripping out any of the bolts. Last would be a strap wrench, and the strap wrench is basically to remove the collar. You'll need these on nearly all models of KS dropper, with the exception of the A12 Integra and the Rage I. So those two will use a little different system that we'll talk about later, but the strap wrench you can get from most hardware stores, and they're generally used for fitting pipes that you don't want to do damage to. So if they're a chrome finish or something, these allow you to grab and turn pipe without damaging the surface. So local hardware stores, and again, this is called a strap wrench. And then we definitely like to use a microfiber towel for cleaning and the internal parts and everything. These work really well with the degreaser. They tend to take all of the debris off of your post. So you can get these through most hardware stores, or if you have a Costco in your area, they do their Kirkland brand of towels that work really well. Okay, so to service our E20i, which actually internally is the same as the E20i. The difference would be the clamp head. E10i is the offset, E20i is a 2-bolt inline head, but internally they're going to be the same. So for this video, we're just going to show you the E10i disassembly process. So one tool, in addition to the ones we discussed earlier, that you want to have is an adjustable wrench, or crescent wrench. So you want to make sure that you've got that handy for the service. So I think first step we're going to do is we'll go ahead and just take this clamp head out of the way, just so it's not loose and rattling around the whole time we're working. Okay, so the first step we're going to want to do is to break the seal collar loose, and we can either use these soft jaw blocks. Again, you can get the V blocks from your local hardware store, machine shop supply, possibly Amazon, and the V block will do the same job. If you don't have these or can't find V block, you can also clamp this in your frame, and then we're going to use this strap wrench to unscrew the collar, and we're going to go ahead and do it here in the vise with the clamps because it's going to be easier to show you how to do that than any other method. So I'm gonna just snug that down so it doesn't move. We're gonna take our strap wrench, and the strap wrench, again, you can get from your local hardware store. They're used for fitting plumbing, and the idea is that this strap won't do any damage or scratch plumbing surfaces like a chromed pipe. So this is perfect for undoing your seal collar. We'll slide this on here. Actually, I got it backwards. Go this way. I had it right the first time. So you can just omit those two steps. You don't have to flip-flop it around. But so there you go. You want to just break it loose. You can set that aside, and then the seal collar is going to unthread. Okay, we're going to flip this around so it's easier for you to see. If you're working at home on this, you don't have to flip this in the vise. I'm just doing it so you have better visibility here. You want to adjust your adjustable wrench to fit the end. We're going to unthread that. Use a rag, it's a little easier to get a hold of the end cap to turn it. Okay, we'll go ahead and take this out. Okay, our next step is going to be to clamp onto the shaft here, and you can either use the soft jaws this way. If you don't have soft jaws, a couple other ways you can do is double or triple up your rag and put that in the vise. And you want to get it just tight enough to hold this, but not tight enough to where you damage that shaft. If you don't want to use the rag, you can also use the rubber here on your strap wrench. Put it in the vise and clamp, and then that way you've got rubber against that shaft and you don't do damage to it. And again, we're going to go ahead and break that loose and unthread the actuator. We'll go ahead and set that aside. Okay, oops. Okay, something to mention, there is a push rod in here, and I just tipped it and dropped it out. So be careful when you're handling it. This has grease on it, it'll probably stay in. If it, in this case, is a little dry, so it slid right out. So just be careful you don't lose that, set that aside. And then you've got a bushing at the top. We're gonna take that out and set it aside. And then as we slide this out, you want to be careful. Set the mast tube aside. Now you have a bushing, POM bushing at the top. We're going to use the utility knife like we talked about earlier to kind of pop those bushings out. It just makes it easier than trying to do that with your fingernail. Okay, so we take those out and just set those aside. Now, if you are replacing your cartridge because you have low pressure or have some issue with your cartridge, at this point you'll want to clamp the cartridge in the vise here gently and turn that counterclockwise. That's going to unscrew the cartridge from your post. At this point, you would want to wipe everything down and clean it up. Put a thin layer of the Slick Honey grease or KS post paste grease on the cartridge, and then you'll go ahead and tighten the cartridge into the assembly, and you only need it to be hand tight. So once you get to where it stops, just a little twist and that's enough. Then we'll take the seal collar out. We want to use some of our degreaser. And we're going to wipe down the mast. We're going to wipe down our seal collar and bushing in here. And we're going to take some of the Slick Honey or post paste, And what we're doing is we're putting grease in that cavity. So you want to fill that up with the grease. The reason we do that is that it pre-lubes as it goes through, and it also creates a weather-tight barrier. So then we'll go ahead and install that back on. Then we're going to take our rag and degreaser, and we're going to clean all these bushings. Well, you have them out, take a look at them, make sure that there's no excessive wear. They should be cylindrical. They shouldn't have flat spots in them. If yours have flat spots, you want to source some new bushings from your local bike shop and put those in while you're doing the service. But as long as they look to be in good condition, you can go ahead and reinstall those. So what happens with these is if you bounce them around, they can fall back out. So to make it a little bit easier to put this back together, take some of your grease, put some in the groove. The metal bushing goes down at the bottom, push that in, and now it'll stick, so it won't fall out on you. And then you put the POM bushing on top. Okay, so we're going to do that on all 3 spots. Okay, so then we're going to set that aside. Okay, next we want to clean this bushing here. And you want to clean the inside of the mast tube. And the easiest way to do that, we've still got a little bit of the degreaser on this rag from cleaning the other parts. And just use, in this case we're using the Allen wrench handle. And just push that in there. And then get it in there as far as you can, move it around, and then pull it out. And in this case, it was pretty clean inside, so we don't see a lot of debris. There's a little discoloration there. But you can sight down, looking down inside the tube, and you want to make sure that there's no debris left in there. Okay, so then our next step is going to be to take some extra grease, and we're going to load up the bushings. And we can also take some and put inside the mast tube and just kind of wipe it around the inside diameter. Now when we put this back together, if you put your thumb, middle finger on the back side here, and index finger here, you can hold those in and now they can't fall out at all. So we want to make sure that the threaded side points towards what you're assembling. And then as you start to slide it in, you'll have to rotate it. You can see here if that won't go, and as I rotate, it finds the slot. Okay, so we'll gently push that through. When you get to the point where it starts to feed in the POM bushings, be careful and just push gently. If those bushings pop out of the position and you force it, you can damage the bushing. So just take your time with that, push it in. And then we're going to take this additional bushing, and it installs in a groove here at the top. You can use your utility knife. I'm not using the cutting surface, but I'm just pushing from the side and helping to guide that into the slot. It's important that that seats in properly before you put on the seal collar. If you just thread this on without properly seating it, you'll crush that and damage it, and then you'll have to source a new bushing. So make sure you take your time with that. And then we're going to go ahead and thread the seal collar on. And we're only going to tighten it down hand tight. Okay. Now, if you're in wet weather conditions, it's a great idea to take a little bit of this grease and coat the outside of the compression rod, and also put a little coat on your push rod here. Drop that back inside. I also like to take a little dollop of it and put it here. The reason for that is when you thread this together, it's going to leave a little grease at the top of the push rod where that moves on the actuator. So that keeps that all lubricated and happy. So we'll thread this back on by hand. And then again, we'll use a rag or your strap wrench strap, or a V-block if you have one. I'm going to tighten that down just so it won't move. And now this is hand tight, and you'll see here, that's it. That's all I want to turn it. You don't need to crank on it. If you do and you over torque it, you can break this. So just slightly past hand tight. Now we're going to go ahead and pull the cartridge, and that'll pull your compression rod back up, and then you're just going to turn this and you'll feel it start threading by hand. Okay, again, that's hand tight. Okay, we're going to put this in the vise. Now, earlier you probably saw me use the wrench here to undo the actuator from the compression rod. And that's okay, you won't have to use much torque to get that loose. But when you tighten this part, I would recommend to open the wrench back up and fit it on the flats here. Don't turn from here because you could break this if you over torque it. Okay, so this is hand tight now, and I'm just gonna turn, you can see, just a little bit past hand tight. That's plenty. Now we're gonna switch this back around. And we're doing this just for the sake of you being able to see this. You don't need to do this if you're doing the repair yourself. You gotta take a little bit more degreaser, and I'm gonna clean the collar. The reason for that is that if there's grease on that and you use your strap wrench, you can have the strap wrench slip, you'll contaminate the rubber on this, and then the wrench won't work well for you in the future. So get this good and clean. Again, it's hand tight. Put my strap wrench on. We'll put it on the right way this time. Okay, so that's hand tight now. Just slightly past hand tight is enough. Okay. So now we've got everything back together. What I like to do on these before this goes into the bike is I'll flip it over. And this is important. You can put an Allen through the lever. Do not, when you pull on it, pull on an angle. If you pull on an angle, you're gonna break this part. This is designed for the actuator and cable clamp to interface here, not really for a tool. But I'm gonna show you how to do this and not damage it. So if you push this through, you put your thumb on top, you can see I've got a hold of it this way. I can pull that up, and I'm pulling straight up and down. I'm not pulling on an angle. So I pull that straight up, and I can go ahead and cycle it. And I see everything's working great. Now we can go ahead and put our clamp head back on. At this point, it's a good time to also clean these and put a little bit of either some grease or some anti-seize compound on all these parts. And now this is ready to reinstall on your bike. Be sure that you use a torque wrench to properly torque your clamp bolt when you put that all back in. And that's it.